Welcome everybody to another episode of Fins Nation. I am your host, Louis Sung, and today we're going to be talking about Tua Tagovailoa and his understanding of the Miami Dolphins offense. As a matter of fact, folks, today we got a quote from Tua that maybe finally answers the question of why it is that the Miami Dolphins kept having so many pre-snap penalties last season. We kept wondering, is it because the message isn't getting through? Is it because it's being placed between Frank Smith and it's being placed between Mike McDaniel and then it's going to be wired to Tua that way? Is it because of the fact that the Miami Dolphins had backup quarterbacks in who didn't understand what was going on very well? What really was it that was making the offense go so slowly and yet still be as explosive as it really was? We're going to go ahead and speculate on all of that based on the quotes that we got today from Tua. But before that, really quick, just want to go ahead and mention that as always, this show is brought to you by our good friends over at You Brake Wheel Fix. You Brake Wheel Fix is the complete automotive wheel solution. Ever parked too close to the sidewalk curb? You Brake Wheel Fix specializes in the repair of damaged wheels from bends, cracks, and curb rash. Or maybe your wheels are faded or peeling. You don't need to replace them, as You Brake Wheel Fix can refinish them to like new. Offering complete refinish options through powder coating, machining, and polishing, You Brake Wheel Fix is the answer to all of your wheel needs. And if you're just looking to give your ride a new look, You Brake Wheel Fix also offers many car customizing options, such as new custom wheels and tires from your favorite brands, performance upgrades, window tinting, and suspension modifications. Located just south of Aventura, you can reach Mark and his staff at 305-748-0112 or online at youbrakewheelfix.com. They are really active on all social media platforms at You Brake Wheel Fix, so shoot them a DM on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter and get an estimate in just minutes. So don't delay, go to You Brake Wheel Fix and start customizing your ride to show off your Dolphins fandom today. This show is also brought to you by PrizePicks.com. PrizePicks.com is the revolutionary fantasy platform where you can now pick up to 6 different players across professional sports leagues. Whether that's the NFL, the NBA, the MLB, one of each, it's up to you to decide. Just choose whether your chosen player will get more or less in their projected stat. They give you free squares, special Taco Tuesday promos, Flex Friday specials where you can get your money back if you lose or multiply the amount of money you can normally win. So with offers like that, it's hard to justify not signing up if you are any kind of a fantasy sports fan. So use the promo code 5, that's FIVE, and they will match up to $100 on your initial deposit when you sign up. Again, that's promo code 5, FIVE. Go to prizepicks.com, deposit your $100, and let PrizePicks give you $100 of their dollars for you to play with and get started winning today. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's go ahead and just dive into this real quick. So yesterday, Tua Tagovailoa held a press conference after practice. Again, this was a joint practice with the Houston Texans, which, by the way, if anybody has seen the video of Laramie Tunsil just absolutely stonewalling Bradley Chubb, let's not overreact and act like that Bradley Chubb is just not a good player. Please remember who Laramie Tunsil is, what we were able to get for him, and why he is still considered one of the best left tackles in the NFL, okay? Okay. Good. Now that we've got that cleared up. So now we're going to go ahead and talk about the Miami Dolphins offense. As everybody is already aware, the Miami Dolphins struggled mightily last season, trying to make sure that plays got off in time before the play clock ran out. What it seemed like it was almost every other play. The play clock was running down right to the 1 or even the 0 before the snap finally went off and the Dolphins were able to run their play. And the plays that they ran were very, very effective most of the time. We have to at least give them that much. But how often did we end up also seeing a false start or something along the lines of an illegal formation, or if somebody it was delay of game? These penalties were a very regular occurrence, and they did hinder an offense that, quite frankly, if they could have eliminated those penalties, may very well have been completely unstoppable all season long. As it was, they ran into the San Francisco 49ers and then the Los Angeles Chargers that really slowed them down. But that was more about the defensive scheme and not so much the penalties themselves. But think about this. It's all about cleaning up what was already really good, okay? You have a diamond, and it's covered in dirt. You just have to polish off that diamond, get it all cleaned up, and it's basically going to sparkle for you. The Dolphins still had a diamond. It just needed some polishing. And so what we're going to go ahead and look at now is I think that Tua Tagovailoa just gave us an inside look into why the Dolphins just could not seem to get it all together at just the right times. It always seemed like they were falling behind. It always seemed like they were always 1 second away from getting calls for a penalty. And this was something that was frustrating Dolphins fans mightily immediately, including myself. I was extremely frustrated thinking to myself, why can't they just get this play done? We didn't even have this problem when Brian Flores was the head coach, and Brian Flores had offenses that were just god-awful. Is it because of Tua Tagovailoa? Is it because Mike McDaniel is slow? Is it because the communication between the offensive coordinator and the head coach and the quarterback just was not very streamlined? What exactly was it that was going on? Well, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to read you this quote here from Tua Tagovailoa from Wednesday's practice against the Houston Texans, just so you all get an idea of what it was that's going on. So I'm just going to read this to you, and you guys, I will go ahead and explain it right after that. So the question was asked that they have long play calls, and Mike McDaniel talked about it last week, saying that they're still the same play calls and he hasn't shortened them. So, and that Mike McDaniel was counting on Tua to be better versed with them to be able to get it out and into the huddle. So this is what he was asked. Would you like to see the plays trimmed down? That was the question. Would you want them to be trimmed down? And this is what Tua had to say. Apparently, it's not as simple as just having shorter play calls. So watch this. Quote, I would say it's a blessing and a curse because you do want all these indicators because it sort of tells us what the defense is in and whatnot. But then to that point, the clock is going down and it's long. I would say the thing is, like for us in the quarterback room, there are some times where you just have to memorize the play where when it's coming in, you're like, okay, you're seeing it while he's like not even finishing it. So that was the first quote. So there are obviously going to be indicators here. So first of all, Tua just said that all these things that are in the play calls is basically telling Tua this is what's going on with the defense. This is what's happening. They're basically getting a preview of the play before it happens. But the problem with that is, just as he mentioned, all this time that you're getting this information, the play clock is going down. You can't always afford to give that much information. So sometimes you just have to memorize the play and know what the play is ahead of time and say, boom, this is it. Everybody's on the same page. Okay, let's go. So we already knew. We learned recently that Tyreek Hill had even admitted that he didn't really know the offense as well as he would have liked to. Now, this season is going to be different because now he's had more time to study it and understand it, but he did basically admit that a lot of what he was doing out there was just based on instinct and his raw athleticism. So knowing that, it would make sense that a lot of these guys, they're all looking at this offense and thinking, wow, this is complex. Wow, this is tough. And just because you have a complex offense does not necessarily mean it needs to be dumbed down. If the offense works, it works. And last season, we saw that it worked. So now we have a second season with the same offense, and a vast majority of the players that are here in Miami now are still the same players. So now Tua was asked a follow-up question. So he was asked from this year to last year, have they gotten to the point where they know the play call and they already know that they don't have to like get in the huddle and just interpret everything and figure out what everything means? So this is what Tua's response was, and I quote, well, I would say yes and no, it's a little tough. I can give you guys a play, and then if you guys want to repeat it after me as if you guys are in the huddle, you guys can. All right, should I go once or twice saying it? All right, we got north, right side, clamp, south, fox, H-top, pass, 38, top, Gumby, XP, sweat. Let's go. And then I'll go ahead and mention it. Tua asked around, did anybody understand that? Oh, that's a pre-snap penalty. So did any of those words that just came out of my mouth seem to make any sort of sense to anybody? Maybe there's somebody out there who was listening to this right now, played football, and is like, okay, I kind of recognize a few of those terms. I'm just going to give, just for the laughs and giggles, I'm going to go ahead and just read this back to you one more time. So, we've got north, right, clamps, south, fox, H, top, pass, 38, top, Gumby, XP, sweat. Did anybody understand that? I saw Gumby. I kind of know what Gumby means because I know what Gumby is. I know what a top is. I've seen what the fox says. Like, just throw all the memes out there that are associated with these words. There is not one word in there in that sequence that makes it seem like it should be in a sentence. Now, me not playing any football and not actually having been out there on the football field in any capacity, it's understandable that it wouldn't make a whole lot of sense to me. But even if you are somebody who has played football, any player will tell you that when you have to go in there and you have to memorize a new playbook, it's basically starting over from scratch. Yeah, you can learn exactly what it is you're doing, and you're kind of associated with knowing how to learn this stuff because you've done it so many times before in your life already. You had to do it in high school probably, you had to do it in college to some extent, now you're in the NFL and you're doing it all over again, and as you switch teams around, as coordinators get moved in and moved out, you end up having to learn everything all over again every single time. And it can be difficult, it can be frustrating even. So now here you have the Miami Dolphins and Mike McDaniel's first year as the Miami Dolphins head coach, and you can already see what this offense is potentially capable of. But you're seeing all these pre-snap penalties. You're seeing all these play calls that are taking forever to get onto the field and snap the football. Well, it looks like we now understand why. Tua just gave it to us. He gave us the answer. You try to figure out exactly what all this means without actually having a real chance to memorize it and learn it. Sometimes play calls take a lot longer to figure out than others do. Like, for instance, everybody here who has listened to this show and everybody who has been a Miami Dolphins for any length of time, but particularly starting in 2012, when Mike Sherman was the Miami Dolphins offensive coordinator under Joe Philbin. And you already know where I'm going with this, right? The offense was so simplified. It was simplified to such a degree that you immediately knew whether the Dolphins were going to run the ball or whether they were going to pass the ball just by whether Ryan Tannehill said 38, go, or 38, go, go. Once you heard the two goes, you knew it was a run play. You just knew. And if there was only one, you knew they were going to throw the football every single time. That's how simple those play calls were. So you can imagine they probably weren't rushing to the line every single time. But when your play calls are that easy and they're that simple to understand, then no, there probably wouldn't be much of a rush. Now you get what you're hearing from Tua here, and you're going to try to compare that. Whoa, what is all this? I am positive that Mike Sherman's offense was much simpler in the huddle than whatever it was that Tua just gave to the media yesterday. So now we have a Miami Dolphins offense that last season, I'm reading this number off of NFLpenalties.com, and if I'm reading this correctly, for penalties pre-snap, the Miami Dolphins were the absolute worst in the NFL with 35 offensive pre-snap penalties. The only team that comes close are the Arizona Cardinals with 31 and the New York Giants, who also had 31. Then going for even further down, you have Philadelphia Eagles with 29, Minnesota Vikings 29, Denver 28, Las Vegas Raiders 27. But you can see the discrepancy here. The Miami Dolphins were the worst, and there is no denying that. Even Mike McDaniel admitted in a previous press conference that they were absolutely the worst when it comes to this stuff. And the whole point was to try to correct that and make it better. So now, though, this is exactly what we've been waiting for, right? Tua had said that yes and no, things were getting better. But the yes comes in just from knowledge. This is exactly what we've been waiting for, right? When Tyreek Hill admits that he didn't know the offense as well as he wanted, that is not necessarily a knock against Tyreek Hill as a football player or whether he knows what he's doing or not. We know Tyreek Hill will perform. And Tua Tagovailoa having the same situation. He's the quarterback. Of all the people on the team, he should know these things way more than everybody else just because he is the guy who is calling in all of these plays, right? At least we would think that. But again, I'm not using this as a knock on Tua. I am using this as an understanding of this is how complicated and complex this offense really is. And this is why we have to be a little bit patient with what we're seeing. It's easier, though, to be patient with it when we see that the offense was actually able to do some incredible things last season. And that's with less than a perfect understanding of what the offense was. Also, I'll go ahead and I'll offer this nugget for you. Just yesterday, I did a show about Eric Ezukanma and why he was learning the offense and trying to understand what it was that it demanded of him, what his role was supposed to be, and just how polished he had to be in everything that he was doing. Think about that. We had already heard over and over again, Eric Ezukanma isn't ready. Eric Ezukanma is learning. Eric Ezukanma is waiting for his opportunity to come, and when it does, he will be ready. But his opportunity has not come up until what we seem to think is this season, where now he's had an entire year worth of learning and knowledge gained that he's going to be able to use in these situations. But now it all of a sudden seems to make a whole lot of sense. It's not that Eric Ezukanma was just not understanding, that he's just not bright enough to understand what the offense is. Maybe some guys learn some bits and pieces faster than him. Okay, that's fine. I'm not going to say that maybe some people are slower learners than others. Some people are faster learners than others. Everybody's different. But just because Eric Ezukanma didn't get it right off the bat does not mean that he was not understanding it. But what it does mean is that there was a lot to learn. A lot to learn. And by the way, I should also mention, Braylon Sanders, it's not like he was some world beater who was just so much better than Eric Ezukanma when he actually hit the field. He had his own struggles too. That one drop that everybody hated him for, I can give you that as an example, as a little bit of a reminder of what happened there. I wasn't being as hard on Braylon Sanders as some others were, but mistakes happen, particularly when you're not necessarily sure of yourself. And that happens more times than we would like to admit. We'll see that players are struggling. We see that players are not really picking it up as quickly as we would like. We see miscommunications on offense for one reason or another. And all of that has to boil down to what exactly is it that we are hearing when we go ahead and we analyze these offensive plays. We see that Frank Smith is calling in the play. Then we see Mike McDaniel has to wire it in. Then we see that Tua Tagovailoa has to wire it into the rest of the team. And if the play call is that long, then you have to kind of figure out exactly what the play call means. Make sure everybody's on the same page. And if everybody is not on the same page, then the play is not going to go as originally intended. We saw last season, a lot of times it looked like somebody was not in the right spot. There were a lot of times where somebody would have to point to the other guy and say, hey, you're in the wrong spot. Get over here. Get over here. And it was already too late. The play call was about to run out. How many times did the Dolphins have to call timeout because they had to readjust themselves? All this stuff was happening, and we were frustrated, not understanding why. And it's just because it's a lot of offense to understand. And now that we know that, I can be a little bit more forgiving about what it was they were dealing with. I can be a lot more forgiving knowing that the Miami Dolphins offense was actually functional last season, as opposed to the years with Brian Flores' offense where the offense wasn't even really moving much of anywhere. It was extremely frustrating to watch the offense just flounder with either Chan Gailey, George Godsey, and Eric Studsville. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who the offensive coordinator was back in those times because the offense just didn't seem to work. The only time it really seemed to work, and again, not a knock on Tua, because think about what it is that he's being asked to do here. The only thing that seemed to work was when Ryan Fitzpatrick threw caution to the wind and went YOLO and said, somebody's down there somewhere. That's why I said many times on different shows, I do not think that Ryan Fitzpatrick was a better quarterback than Ryan Tannehill was when he was in Miami. Far from it. I think Ryan Tannehill is definitely better than Ryan Fitzpatrick. But darn if Ryan Fitzpatrick was not more fun to watch than Ryan Tannehill was. With Ryan Tannehill, you knew exactly what you were getting. He was going to be solid, he was going to be good, but he was not necessarily going to be the guy that's going to carry your team to victory when he's needed most. That's Ryan Tannehill. Not a knock on him. He's good, not great. We accept it, we understand it, and we move on. With Ryan Fitzpatrick, there are going to be some days where he's going to throw for 500 yards and 6 touchdowns and no interceptions, and he's going to be the greatest quarterback you've ever seen play the game. And then there are going to be some days where he throws for 150 yards, 5 interceptions, 0 touchdowns, and you want to just shoot this guy into the sun because of how terrible he is. And then there are some days where he's just, nah. You just never know. Are you going to get Ryan Fitzmagic, Ryan Fitzpatrick, Ryan Fitztragic? You just don't know. That was why I always thought, oh, it's fun to watch him. You don't know what he's... Every series, it seemed to change. He was either going to be something amazing. He was going to hit some guy in stride that you never even knew was open, probably because he wasn't open. Or he's going to end up hitting a defender who was standing there waving his hand saying, hey, I'm open, and Fitzpatrick just throws it to him because he doesn't even know who he's throwing to. That's what it felt like most of the time. So it was fun, but that's the only way the offense ever seemed to really go anywhere during the Brian Flores era. And that's not something that you want to hang your hat on. With the Miami Dolphins offense under Mike McDaniel, though, it works. And even with a halfway understanding of what the offense actually was, they were able to do that. Just imagine for a moment, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, the battered Dolphins fan in me admits that I'm a little concerned that the Dolphins offense will take a step back next season. But I have no logical reasoning for that. Every single sign that I'm seeing points to the Dolphins offense being better than ever. The only reason they're not dominating in practice as is because they're experimenting with different things, different styles, maybe even different plays that we are not privy to, nor are we allowed to actually report on, because for the eyes on the ground, they have very specific rules about what they are allowed to say and what they are not allowed to say. We'll never know what they're doing until they actually go onto the field and show everybody what they're doing by running the play themselves. And you know what? I'm very anxious to see what it is that we're going to be seeing. I think the Dolphins offense has the potential to be something truly remarkable. With Tua Tagovailoa and Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle coming back from his injury, they're basically holding him out at this point, saying, you know what, you don't need any more practice. We know that you're good. Let's just continue to move on here. So the way that I'm looking at this is an eye-opener for me, because now that we know that it seems like all these pre-snap penalties were very much a result of just how long the play calls were, and everybody was trying to understand it and interpret it correctly. This just makes me feel like if that truly was the reason, then that means that this season, now that everybody has a good handle on what it is that they're trying to do, there is nothing that can stop this Dolphins offense from being the most prolific post-Marino era offense that we have ever seen from this team. And that means that the Chad Pennington era, the Wildcat era, all that stuff, we could potentially see something truly special, and I am looking very forward to seeing what they do. Now, if it turns out they still struggle with pre-snap penalties, then we'll start raising our eyebrows a little bit. But for right now, I'm willing to accept the explanation that, hey, these play calls are really long, and sometimes guys don't understand every part of it. But that's why we needed a long time to be able to understand it. So now let's just keep a very close eye on what the Miami Dolphins are able to accomplish this season. Let's start counting pre-snap penalties and seeing how many get eliminated from last season. Because if the number goes down significantly, then we'll know that Mike McDaniel and Tua Tagovailoa basically just gave us the secret, and it was that, yeah, it's a complicated offense. Deal with it. So that's going to be it for this show. Thank you all so much for listening. If you haven't already done so, make sure you go to You Break Wheel Fix if you need to get your wheels repaired, or if you need to give your ride a new look. 305-748-0112 is the number to call, or you can go to youbreakwheelfix.com and get an estimate in just minutes. And of course, go to prizepicks.com, use the promo code 5, that's FIVE, and they will match up to $100 on your initial deposit when you sign up using that promo code. We will see you all tomorrow for another episode of Fins Nation.